And we're back. We have Austin Jochum. Austin, thanks for coming on, man. Can you, for people who aren't familiar with you, can you just provide an intro on yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, well, I'm pumped to be here, honored to be here. I'm pretty excited to be here. This conversation, bridging the gap almost between strength conditioning, sports performance, and PT, is one that I enjoy to have. Yeah, I'm Austin Jochum. I own my own performance gym. I coached at the collegiate sector, Division 3, all the way to Division 1. I've worked with high schools, everything like that. I'm terrible at technical audio stuff, and I spent 23 minutes setting this podcast up. So we're ready to rock and roll now.
Perfect. Yeah. So I found out about you through your podcast. I don't know how, but I've been really enjoying the conversations you've had with other coaches, with therapists, your Instagram. And I wanted to bring you on because this is largely a rehab oriented listenership. I wanted to bring on someone that feels more comfortable and is in the trenches of coaching, working with athletes, programming, and how do we kind of blend these two fields in a sense, and how do we meet in the middle? So I want to start with kind of a broad question, and you can take it wherever you want. But when you have a new athlete coming to you in your facility or remotely, whatever it is, what is your framework for creating a training plan for an athlete? What things
Yeah,
are you thinking about?
honestly, especially let's start with like in person. When I have an athlete come to the gym, I think the number one thing that I do that's maybe a little bit different is like zero screening. The thing that I'm screening them on is so when they walk into my gym, we got like 60 yards of turf and then the weight room, right? So they got to walk through. All the athletes kind of sit at like half court of this 60 yards of turf. I will sit all the way at the back. And you bring in this new athlete. And my favorite thing to do is just watch how they interact when they come. Like when they walk in the door, do that. They're like head down, texting, and like trying to walk past everybody as fast as possible, trying to get to me. Or do they? Some athletes can't even figure out how to get in the door. That's another good little test. Like, what type of athlete is this athlete as a person? Like who are they as a person? Are they a problem solver? Are they confident in their own abilities? And what you'll see is a lot of athletes, they walk in super nervous with their head down, or they'll text you like, "Hey, can you come let me in?" It's like, well, the door's open. Like, just come in. Like, come hang out with us. And I value these data points when we're building a program because the number one thing I feel like strength coaches can do is provide a space for them to be confident in their bodies and confident in what they do, right? And when you watch these athletes walk in and they're not confident, I know almost to a T that athlete is going to be the very same athlete that we program something that's a little unorthodox and they're going to be very, very hesitant to do it, right? These are the athletes that will, and a lot of times they've been told by a old strength coach, an old PT, that something's wrong with them, and then they've stuck with that story and they keep telling themselves that story, and you can just kind of see all of these stories that they've been told throughout their lives manifest itself in this little walk, in this 60-yard walk. They have something wrong with them. They're broken. They're not confident. And if I can just provide them a space to get out of those thought processes and prove to them that their bodies are capable, it is unbelievable what those athletes then go and do from that moment. Because then I'm not having to like drag the mule through all of these programs. It's I'm capable. What else can I do? I didn't think I was able to do these things. I was told my knees were bad. I was told my back was bad. I was told I couldn't squat or deadlift ever again. Now I can. What else can I do? And if you get into that athlete, into that what else mentality, there's nothing more I can really provide as a stimulus. Like they are full go now, and they're running their face through the wall in everything that we do. So that's how I build out programs for them. What can I do program wise to get them to the point in which they are confident in what they're able to do? And from there, I think everything else is pretty easy.
So you're seeing them on day one, just how they present themselves and maybe some of the prior narratives and beliefs and things that they were taught and view of themselves and their body. Let's get more into the nitty gritty. So day one, they walk in. Are they just joining this kind of team training plan? What are the next steps for you?
They get thrown into the first warm up game that we play, whether it's spike ball, an agility type game, like whatever we're doing day one, they are doing with us. And this is the beautiful thing that I like about that is you can pick up on so much just watching a move. In a game of spike ball, I can learn so much about an athlete. Like what's their ability is to pass their teammate, communicate with their teammates? What's their ability to like bend, squat, and dive for a ball? Do they have those options? When you get to some of these agility games, like are they quick? Are they a fast athlete? Are they a strong athlete? Are they a confident athlete? Are they an athlete that feels like they can score? Or are they an athlete that feels like that's not their role? And I pick up on all these data points just in our movement practice. And I think I learned more from the first 40 minutes of those sessions, just throwing them into the games, than a lot of the screening tests I've done in the past. And again, I've done a lot of the screens in the past. I've done everything in the college world. I was like, I really thought I had these answers figured out by doing these screens, by doing these certain warm-ups, by doing these certain tests. And I learned more in 40 minutes with these athletes than I ever did in these tests. And we're getting a great training stimulus in. From there, we're bringing them into the weight room after whatever we did that day, whether it was an agility session or a speed session. We bring them into the weight room, and we got traditional weight room stuff, an upper body lift, a lower body lift, some jumps, sorry, some mobility stuff, some armor building stuff. And from there, you can also pick up on a ton. Like, how do they hinge? How do they squat? What's their ankle mobility like? And I like challenging them through some of these unorthodox movements too. So let's say it's like a partner pushed lift. Like, how do they interact with their partner when they're doing this? How do they interact with something that's new? Does their strength hold up when it's not a perfect barbell? All of these things is picking up on it. From there, I will gradually build out their plan. Usually it takes like a week or two, just like watching a move and like, oh, this is the things that you suck at. And that's really what I build my plans around, like the law of diminishing returns. What are you shit at, and how can we bring what you're shit at to what you suck at? And I think most programs focus on what the athlete's good at and bring them from good to great, but it takes a lot of effort and energy to go from good to great at things. And the only thing I need my athletes good to great at is their sport. Like, I need them great at their sport. Everything else, I just want to bring them up to good as fast as possible. So stuff like bear crawls, gymnastics, like a lot of these like movement based activities, they're absolute shit at and they can't do. And I would just give them a tiny stimulus of that. They're going to go from shit to suck real quick, or from suck to good real quick. And you see these athletes, they come back like, dude, I feel amazing. Like, a total shift in everything I've been doing. Like, there was nothing magical there. It's just you were so bad at it. It's like you're touching a barbell for the first time. We're just giving you that stimulus in a different way. And I think a lot of athletes have maxed out, not maxed out, but they've put a lot of effort into the barbell and they're already good at that. What can I give them that new novel stimulus from? And a lot of it's the movement stuff that we do.
It sounds like pretty much every session you'll start with some type of play or game format on the turf and allow some level of competition, mirroring, free, I guess, play and fun. Is that pretty much how every session starts?
Yes. Yeah. So the first thing we do will be a fun, very general play game. That'll be the spike balls. That'll be the volleyballs. That'll be foursquare, like maybe some goofy like pig exercise where they're like mirroring each other. Like, one person does a backflip, the other one has to do a backflip, that type of stuff. Like, general, very general. The only goal of that is to get them moving, get them warmed up. You can screen some of their movement stuff like, oh, they're very stiff today. They're very beat up. The energy's not there, or it is there. But give them a time to play, give them a time to relax, give them time to move and warm up and have fun. And the goal from that is just get energy high in the room, get them super hyped. And from there, I got a big like energy battery that we just created. I'm going to funnel that into our main stimulus for the day. So whether that's an agility movement problem. So then from the general play, we'll go a little bit more specific into whatever their sport is. So let's say if it's a football athlete, I'm going to work on agilities on Monday and Wednesday, and we're going to do 1v1 sessions where we got a muddle game and we have like a 45-degree angle chase, and the athlete has to score. But that's our main stimulus for the day. We're going to work on these 1v1 environments. And then maybe Wednesday, it'll be a little bit wider field. Tuesday, Thursday, we're going to do sprints. So we create that big energy battery. And now we're going to do some sprints, chases, and runs like that. And then we'll go into lifting from there. But again, bringing up a big battery of energy and then funneling it into what our specific stimulus for that day is. And it's been really, really effective for these athletes, because most of their day, dude, I talk about the zombie apocalypse. Like, most of their day is planned out from the second they wake up to the second they go to bed. It's like they wake up, they're told what to eat for breakfast, what to do in class, what to do at practice. Like, I don't know if you've seen collegiate practice plans, but it's like every 5 minutes is planned out. And I get like you have to have organization skills, but then they come to your weight room, they come to your training session, And the one time in their day in which they could have a say, you then hand them a sheet of paper and say, you're doing this at this time for these reps. And it's like, dude, they don't need more time to be a robot. They need more time just to be a human athlete. And so they get there and they can take a deep breath, and there's not a sheet of paper handed to them. And they're having human interactions, and they can say the things that they want to say and wear the things they want to wear. And you'd be shocked at how much athletes enjoy that environment. And it takes little to no effort as a strength coach to like put out a spike ball net and say, hey, go warm yourselves up. Like, let's have fun today.
Can you just elaborate or touch on the sterile nature of a lot of the programming, whether it's change of direction work, sprinting, acceleration, the actual weight room stuff, why you decide to use things like chasing, games, activities they're more enjoyable but still accomplish the goal? Why do you lean that direction?
Oh yeah, there's so much there. So if I go on tangents, just grab me and tell me to go somewhere else. But if it's clean and gets cleaner, it's for us as a strength coach, not for the athlete. And I think that's one of the things I just think as strength coaches, and I know this because I was there, we forget about our own internal biases of like, why are we actually doing these things? Like, we've created systems, and I talk about this when I present, but it's like the goal of a system is to bring the complex nature of everything that is going on with the human body and the environment that the human body interacts with. There's so much going on. Like, could be a girlfriend issue, it could be a program issue, it could be a stress issue, like whatever. There's just so much going on. We don't have all those answers. So at some point we need to funnel it into a system just to like clear some things up for us so we don't have to think about fucking everything at once. So we bring it into a system. But the goal of a system is to simplify it, to bring it back out to reality, right? So, okay, we simplified it into our system. We're doing a max effort lower day because I know we're supposed to do lower body, and a max effort upper body because I know we're supposed to do upper body, whatever. Like, we create all these systems, triphasic, whatever your system is. But then you got to bring it back out into real life, into the sport, into the athlete in front of you. What most systems do is we bring it into the system and then we stay within the system. We never come back out to real life, and we create these fallacies and we build systems on top of systems on top of systems until we get to a point in which we're talking about picking up dumbbells off of a dumbbell rack is dangerous for an athlete. It's like, dude, what are we talking about? Do you watch these athletes move on the field? Do you watch what these athletes are doing in the weight room? Just amazing and beautiful tasks. So it's like, I think staying in reality is really, really important for these athletes. And reality is mess, man. Like, the reality is the chaos that is sport. That is, it's chaos organized into these technical and tactical rules of the sport that they have to, like, they have some constraints. Like, it's like a 100-yard field, but it's still chaos within it. It's like the goal is the score. The movement problem is how can we get this football into the end zone, or how can we stop this football from getting into the end zone? And then there's chaos to how do you do that? And I think a lot of what we do as strength coaches is we create the system of it should be clean because otherwise it's way too much chaos and we don't know what to do with it. So it should be clean, but then we forget why we made it clean. We made it clean for ourselves, not for the athletes. That 3-cone, that pro agility drill is beautiful for us because we can stopwatch and we can show Excel sheets to our strength coaches or to our sport coaches and to our athletic directors and be like, hey, look at how good of a coach I am. I made this really clean. I got them all in nice lines and I have a stopwatch to show them. And the answer, the question at the end of the day is, did you make them a better athlete? But that question's never asked. It never comes back out to real life. It just sticks with these arbitrary KPIs and arbitrary systems that we created for us as strength coaches to feel important, to feel like we have a job, rather than, did we make that athlete a better athlete? And if we're not asking that question, if we're not exploring that chaos, if we're not looking at some of these free play kind of mentalities, I think we are really cleaning up our training sessions selfishly as a coach. And that's the thing that I think if a lot of coaches looked at it that way, they would be like, oh, I see what I'm doing. But it's kind of like weird virtue signal in the strength coaching world where clean means you're a good strength coach, right? And sloppy means you're a sloppy strength coach, right? And it's not so it's like these coaches, they really want it to look clean, not for the athlete, but for the people looking at your session. And I don't think you should care about what people that look at your session think, whether it's your athletic director or whether it's your sport coach, because they don't matter. What matters is the athlete in front of you. And did we get them the results? Did we take them from where they are to where they want to go? And did we help them on that journey? That's really why I had to leave the college sector too. That was a big reason. It's just like, the college sector is not like, you don't perform your job for the athlete. You perform your boss is not the athlete. Your boss in the private sector is the athlete. And I thoroughly enjoy that. Like, They are the one paying you. You have to get them results. You have to make it enjoyable for them to want to show up. And if you don't, they will leave you. And that's a very good thing. They should leave you if you're not getting them the results. College world, it's not like that. You can injure 50 college athletes. And I've seen it done before. Like sport coaches will just injure athletes like nothing. Like some of the stuff we did practice wise was insanity. I told them, don't do that. You're going to have like 7 blown hamstrings a day. Half these athletes haven't worked out all summer. When we were at the Division III level, like a lot, the athletes couldn't work out with the strength coaches. I would talk to the athletes on day 1 of camp. I'm like, did you guys do anything? Nope. I'm like, all right. And the coaches would be like, all right, we're going to do full padded practice today. I'm like, don't do that. You're going to lose 7 hamstrings today. Like, no, I think we need to do it. They do it. What do? You lose 7 hamstrings because you have an untrained athlete go into this environment. But if you do that in the private sector, those athletes are going to leave you. They're going to be like, this is stupid. What are we doing? Like, I'm leaving. You're hurting me. In the college world, it's like they're on scholarship or they're stuck there for a 4-year commitment of going to a college. It's like you hurt them and the athlete's not the boss anymore. The sport coach is the boss. So as long as you make the sport coach happy and as long as you show them the Excel sheets that they want to see, dude, you keep your job. So you could literally be the worst strength coach in the world. You could be the person that hurts the most athletes and you can keep a job as long as you want because the boss is the wrong person. You are working for the wrong person.
Can you dive more into what you mentioned, some of these things that you're looking for, but they have this initial period of playing a game, then you get into more whatever the emphasis of that day is, like accelerative based activities, change direction, primarily, heavier resistance training, whatever it is. What are you trying to like pick out and look at with these athletes when they are more in this kind of free flow experimental play? What are the things that you're seeing as, okay, I need to emphasize these qualities for this specific athlete?
Yeah. So my goal, my KPI, the KPI that I stick with in my system is, can we create learners and lovers of movement to become experts at their skill, whatever that is. So for a quarterback, it would be, can we create learners and lovers of movement that throw a football really well, right? For a wide receiver, it's like, can we create a learner and lover of movement that scores the ball or catches the ball really well? That's our goal, okay? From there, we can break it down into individual KPIs. Why can this wide receiver not score the ball very well? Is it he can't catch the ball very well? If he can't catch the ball, that athlete's going to be in a much different program than the athlete that he's just not fast enough. He can catch everything, but he's just not fast enough. That athlete that's not fast enough, we need to put on a speed program, and we're going to put them through a lot of movement problems. Maybe the athlete doesn't know their playbook, right? Like, so we need to create learners and lovers of movement that can catch and score the football, but he doesn't know where the fuck he's supposed to be, so he can't catch and score the football, so we need to work on the tactical aspects of things. The free play aspect there tries to drill into the general aspects of where do they struggle, right? So we have like QBs and pitchers are a really good example. Like, they solve their movement problems that they are faced with their arm, with throwing a football. You really want them to be a great general thrower of balls, right? That's their goal. And that's what they do. And a lot of these athletes get so domed up that they no longer are just a general thrower of a ball. They're a very specific, my arm slot's here, I have to throw it there this time, and they just totally forget the thing that made them really good was just being a general thrower of a ball. So for an athlete like that, I would put them in an environment like handball, and we're just doing general like throwing of a ball. You're running on the run, you're throwing on the run, you're throwing out of all these different arm slots and all these different positions, and we're creating a general athletic throw over the ball. For some athletes, just giving them that environment in which they are able to explore and movement again has been phenomenal for them. Again, not physiological, just psychological of, I'm a general thrower of a ball. I'm an athletic thrower. I can go and do these things. And that's the funny thing in the American football world. It's like, I've seen so many QBs just get screamed at in practice from throwing or creating on the run, like throwing off different arm slots or throwing to different spots. Yet every single college coach would take Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback day one, and that's what Patrick Mahomes does. He creates on the run, and obviously he makes a throw routinely, but he's also exploring. And that's the thing with elite level athletes. When they practice, they know they're good enough to play within practice. Like, they're basically playing these goofy games we are playing in football because they're good enough to, right? So Patrick Mahomes can throw behind the back and goof around in practice because he knows he's not losing his starting spot, right? He's good enough to make the routine throw routinely when he needs to, but he's also playing this weird exponential game of play within the game. An athlete that isn't at that level yet does not have that freedom and has in practice is no longer practice. Practice is I need to do these things or I will lose my job. So we lose that play-based, exploratory-based movement patterns in practice in which they can enter this exponential growth of play that play allows, like where you're trying something new out. So instead of trying new things out in practice and working on different things, it's all I have to throw the ball at this time in this moment, and they get very siloed into being one type of athlete. And no good athlete is siloed. Good athletes are not siloed. If you don't have answers to a movement option, you don't have multiple answers to a movement option, it becomes really, really stressful to solve those movement options because you have to, like a defensive lineman is a great example. If all you have is a bull rush, that offensive lineman can just sit there and play physical games with you. Your life becomes way easier as a defensive lineman if you have a push pull and a spin move off of your bull rush, because then he can't just sit there and counter your one option with his one option, right? You have multiple ones, so it's an ebb and flow back and forth. Good athletes have multiple options. Good movement practices should create an athlete that has multiple options. Our current system of practice does not. Our current system of practice keeps the movement options they had, whatever they had going into practice, and then we just silo them into that because it's what works in the moment. And I talk about this all the time, but it's like if I try something new at practice and I'm trying something new, so I'm going to fail. Like that's part of the trying something new is you're going to fail, but you fail in practice. The coach looks at that and says, this athlete is not it. Get somebody in there that is it, and you lose your starting spot, right? I want to provide an environment for these athletes to try something new where failure is not like you have that. We all have that competitive thing. So if you fail in these games, they're still competitive and they're still doing it. But it's like I tried something new, and it's like, oh, there's something there, but it failed on the first one. Let me try it again this next time. And then you eventually pick up on some of these new moves, whether it is a spin move or a juke move, or whatever it is for the athlete, a different arm slot to throw off of, a different wide receiver to throw too. I think that's another one in practice that isn't talked about. Like a lot of times I talk to QBs, it's like, why didn't you throw the ball there? That wide receiver's open. He's like, I don't trust that wide receiver to catch the ball. And if I throw it to him and he drops it or it's an interception, like that's on me. So let's provide an environment for them to like trust their wide receivers in that setting, right? There's so many pieces that go into it. But I really believe in creating a practice environment where failure is not the end of the world. And these athletes really are not provided with any of that. Most of their practices are failure is a very, very bad thing rather than it's an experimentation to hopefully unlock a new level of athleticism for you.
Yeah, that's similar in the rehab or training context where they're learning maybe a more simple movement like a hinge, a squat, a split squat, and the coach or provider is just so dictating of the position and the form and cueing every single rep. There's no, I don't know if failure is the right word, but exploration of different positions, things that put them off balance and they have to self-correct, ways for them to figure it out. I know you've gotten into softball and you've tried learning the skill of like swinging a bat and being better at that. What is your view on learning a movement that people may think as there is only one way to do it? How do you go through the process of learning something new?
Well, yeah, multiple things there. Neurotic coaches create neurotic athletes. Like that these athletes, you watch young kids move and play, it's like they don't start neurotic and then we work them out. No, no, no. There was somebody along their time. And like having conversation with the athletes is really important because almost every time it'll be a PT, a strength coach, a sport coach, their uncle third removed. Somebody told them that a certain movement, a certain thing was bad for them, right? And they take these stories and they accept them and they just go forward with them rather than just giving them somebody that says, no, like that's not true. None of what the studies say, none of what just looking at like real life, none of that says that is true. Let's just break them out of that story. So that's step one. Step two, like looking at there's only one way to move. Dude, look at a 5-foot athlete versus a 7-foot athlete squat. Like the squat is going to be one of the most basic movements in human history, right? Like it's not even an agility type movement. There's very few things going on. There's not another athlete to you in the barbell or even you in your body weight. Like take the barbell out of it, take that constraint out of it. Watch those two athletes squat. It's going to be completely different. Like coaches that think there's one way to move just haven't, I don't know, maybe they have their blinders on and that's the system of the system where it's like your your system is pointing out paradoxes right in front of you. Like your system says one thing, your athletes are showing you another thing. Instead of looking at that paradox, like, why is my system saying something different than what I'm seeing in real life? Instead of questioning that, it's like the athlete's automatically wrong, my system's right. It's like that's the definition of being trapped within your own system. I really believe these paradoxes when they pop up. So we say athletes shouldn't let their knees come in, right? That you see a lot of really great jumpers and they're finding that triangle and letting those knees come in. So where's that paradox? Okay. So is it all knees in are bad, or is it certain knees in are bad? Like what are we talking about there? And a lot of coaches, they don't look at that aspect of it. It's just like, oh, knees in bad, saw that position bad. Rounded back's the same thing. Like, is all spinal flexion bad, or is certain spinal flexion bad? Is it that athlete got hurt from the deadlift, or is it that athlete got hurt from being like deadlifting 110% of their rep max when they shouldn't have? Like, was it a load management issue and a body's just not leveled up enough issue, or was it the movements? And I think a lot of times, and if you have you read Thinking Fast and Slow? It's like a beautiful book, like talking about how we work as humans and like how we try to simplify things to a singular answer, and it's almost never that simple. And anytime you think it's that simple, it's probably a red flag for you to say, oh, we're just automating this thought process. It's like system A leads to system B. That's the answer. But so many times in life, it's like system A is because of system C through like Z, and there's so much going on to that. And I think the more we simplify, the more we miss out on what's in front of us.
Yeah, I think because this is primarily a rehab based audience, there's a lot of, I think, hesitancy with this mid to late stage rehab where their strategies are opening up or they have more capacity to be able to explore other movement options, but the provider and or the athlete is afraid of exploring those. And as they get closer and closer to this return to sport, return to practice continuum, and they should be exploring more and more things, the intensity should be there. There should be an opening up of what they're able to do within a rehab setting and within just their athletic capabilities. There's concern that they're going to get re-injured. And some of that is valid, especially if they haven't sequentially prepared over the prior months from that rehab. But do you have any suggestions for therapists that the athlete's in a safe position to start introducing play and drills that are more free flowing and not this kind of rigid initial, really constrained rehab that sometimes needs to be there just based off of what they're dealing with? But how do you recommend rehab providers start initiating that?
Yeah, and like you said, like what we started with, it's not easy and it's not stress-free. It's like you're working with an athlete that has worked a long period of time to get back, and you really don't want to be the one to fuck that up. Like you really don't want to be the one that athlete gets hurt off of, and the higher level athlete, the more stress you got. But one of the things that I talked about and we talked about before the podcast started recording was if all you see is injured athletes, all you see is injured athletes, and every athlete then becomes injured or every athlete then becomes hurt. And I think the more you can spend time just taking a step back and look at all the beautiful athletes that aren't hurt and are doing amazing things all the time and just gain faith in the human body again, I think that helps a ton. Just look at all the things the human body survives daily, and the hits in football that they shouldn't have survived, and the weird landings in basketball that they shouldn't have survived, or falling after like getting tackled in soccer, like all of these things that it's like, wow, that human body is absolutely capable of handling just an enormous amount of stress. And the more you can get into those, just like, okay, not everything is breakable, right? It does need to be progressed and regressed to where they are currently at. But the human body is an unbelievable machine. And if we do just progress and regress the way we need to see, like the way we need to, the body will survive, the body will adapt, the body will level up. And that's just more of a thing on a strength coach or strength coach or PT or whoever you are, looking at the athletes and looking like getting that faith again in the human body. Progression, regression, where do you start, right? It will start super constrained, especially with an injured athlete, right? So like we had an athlete, he reached out to us because he just tore his meniscus and MCL in an arena football game. Just brutal, dude. Like it was like he was blocking somebody and just so, this dude, I don't know if he tripped or what, but just total like ACL. I cannot believe he only in quotations got his meniscus and MCL. Like it looked like a whole knee surgery, like whole thing was gonna fall off. It was bad. But for him, it's like we're like you and we're gonna look at each other and we're gonna go little lateral shuffles, right? So like we're going, if I take a step to the right, you're gonna take a step to the right, but we're literally walking, right? So you can start as basic as that. You're still getting some proprioceptive and perception action kind of cycle working there. You're still reacting to somebody, but it's in a super controlled environment, right? And as we gain competency, and a part of that's just at talking to the athlete, what do you feel comfortable doing with? Like sometimes I undershoot with those athletes still. Like we're going and he's like, dude, I feel like I can do way more. And I was like, oh really? He's like, yeah, like this isn't enough. I'm like, okay. And we're having that conversation. Let's do, instead of a walk, we're gonna do like a little shuffle step mirror, but we're still very constrained, right? And as you're having these conversations, you'll progress based off what they're saying and what you're seeing, right? So as they're gaining confidence, okay, now we're going to put them in a super small environment. I think starting super small, growing to the larger field is how you want to do it, right? So we'd start super small. So instead of just being in a straight line, right, we're going to put them in like a 5x5 box, and we're going to do something where, let's say it's more play-based, more dance-based. So I'm going to start with my hands together with his hands. He's going to put his hands on my hands, and now he just has to stay in contact with me. So I'll back up, I'll go side. So now he's working in all these different directions, right? From there, maybe we add in another person, okay? So another person goes in there, and that's another person to perceive in your environment that you're working with. So now we're still having this hand game, but that athlete can get in the way, and he has to like work his way around that athlete. But just small, tiny ticks onto the progression regression scale. And again, it's not going to be a linear scale. There's going to be days where it's like, okay, we built him up into a 2v2 environment where he's moving pretty well. And then the next day he's like, I don't feel as comfortable with that today. And we'll have to regress back to a 1v1. But and the same thing we do with this, I think we're really good, especially in the PT and AT world. I think we're really good in the weight room with a lot of stuff. I've seen really good PTs and ATs, I should say, that are phenomenal in the weight room with this stuff. Progress, regress all day long, dude. I've seen a guy go from like a bodyweight pistol squat all the way to loading up a super heavy lunge, and like they developed his quads amazing and they followed the progression regression scale super nice. It's just it gets the movement, and it's like, how do we progress regress movement? And they get in their heads just a little bit too much, like in the same exact way that you just did it with the weight. Like I saw you go from a body weight, like the most basic body weight squat, all the way to this super like my favorite one was Stu Bourne, who's one of my mentors, but he's an AT and a strength coach, and he worked this dude up to like a 4-plate front foot elevated front squat, front racked Bulgarian with the front foot. Dude, it was a brutal quad. Like I tried it as a non-injured athlete. I'm like, dude, you're from the devil, dude. Like that is the most brutal advanced like quad destruction I've ever seen. So like coaches, PTs, ATs progress that way all the time. Now we just got to do the same exact thing on the field. It's not going from like, okay, we're doing like a couple like single leg hops and sticks into a full go agility session. Like we should progress and regress based off of that. And a lot of that is just simple like reaction stuff that you can add. So instead of that single leg hop test that a lot of them do, maybe it's a point. And we had a point, and then maybe it's a mirror with a partner that they're jumping. But I think most coaches know how to do that. It's just they don't trust. It gets to the movement, and it's a little less trackable, and it's a little more chaotic, and it puts a lot of stress on them. And I think the more coaches can get out of their own heads of seeing athletes as fragile athletes and trusting their ability to progress and regress, the better off the field's going to be.
At what point do you decide to interject or provide feedback or cue in during this process?
Very, very rarely. I really try, and I'm not perfect with this because I have those biases of, oh, if I cue here, if I do this, if I say these things, I feel like I can speed up the process. And I can speed up the process in the moment, but I really like the saying, like, no forced learning ever sticks. And I really think the athlete has to get to the point in which they feel it or they unlock it themselves. And that's not to say there's never a time. I've definitely seen cues where it's like that cue just clicked with that athlete. I just think we get lost in our own cues. It's like it works for one athlete, so we think the cue is what works. The cue is not what works, right? It's what did that cue constrain the athlete to do in that moment, and where was the athlete's brain in that moment? I've used so many stupid cues for myself. It's like softball's a beautiful example. They're not correct cues. It's not what you want. Like you would never say that cue, but for some reason, that thought in the moment when I'm working on it clicked with me, and it provided the right results. Right. So I think not getting lost in that cue and trying to build out the environment in and of itself for the athlete on that day. One cue day one could mean something completely to an athlete, completely different to an athlete than day two with that athlete or athlete B, right? But I think a lot of times as coaches, we get stuck in it's the cue that works. It's like, no, absolutely not. Even with drills too, though, you see this with drills a lot. It's like that drill got the athlete faster. No, that drill got the athletes faster. It's like, no, that drill got that specific athlete faster, not because it was the drill, it's because it made something click in that athlete's head, right? There's a certain drill, but that same drill is probably not going to make that click in the other athlete's head. And instead of realizing that and trying a different drill with that other athlete, it's we stick with the drills rather than sticking with the athletes and trying things that make them have that. I really try to make that athlete have that aha moment, whether it's for confidence in their knee. It's like, oh, I just did that and I'm very confident in my knee again. Like that's an amazing feeling for them. But you have to you can't cue that. I can't just say, hey, trust your knee. Like that's not going to do that athlete. And maybe and sometimes again, it could be a random cue that clicks in some athletes, but it's like, it's not the cue that's going to work there. I need to provide an environment for that athlete to get it themselves. And sometimes that could be a cue there, but most of the time it's going to be just a move. Again, proving to an athlete they can do a pull-up, dude, like I've seen athletes just completely change who they are as athletes because they went from not being able to do a pull-up to being able to do a pull-up. There's nothing physiologically that's totally different there. It's the athlete's ability to like, oh, I'm capable. I'm fucking strong now, dude. I'm like, yes, you are. What else can we do from this moment? And I think the same goes for a lot of this rehab stuff. Not getting lost in your drills, not getting lost in your cue, but trying to use the thing that gives the athlete that aha moment. And if it's not giving them that aha moment, it doesn't mean the drill's bad. It doesn't mean the cue's bad. It means it's not working in the moment. And it doesn't mean the athlete's not listening to you or the athlete's bad. It means it's not working for that athlete in the moment, right? So try something new. Try a different variation of that. Just put a different spin on that. And that's really what I try to do. I try to throw a lot at the athletes to give them the drills and the cues that work for them and allow them to get that aha moment rather than sticking with my system that I have faith in.
I'll think through like, why do I feel like I need to interject here, provide some input? Is it because I don't think they're stressing the tissues that I'm looking to stress? Is it because they're having too much symptoms that are impeding our ability to progress? Is it because the performance, they're just going slower than I think they could if I adjusted something? And with all those, those could be, sometimes I want to adjust it immediately because I think it's a quick fix, or we can constrain it again in another pattern or another way to where I don't have to say it, but we just put something there or change it enough to where they just have to adjust. But yeah, those things go through my head of like, okay, I want to interject, but is it because of XYZ reasons? And even if they visually, it doesn't look how I, in whatever framework, thinks it should look, but they say it's working the tissues that I'm trying to get them to work, or it's accomplishing like the end task or whatever it is, then I'm okay with it. And I think there should be just more fluidity of like how things look on a lot of movements, as opposed to like, it doesn't look like a typical hinge. Well, like you said, there's a lot of ways that can manifest.
And I think as a coach, I think just admitting this one thing, we are selfish apes, man. Like we are, just admit that. And then a lot of stuff frees itself up. Why are you giving that cue? It feels really, really good as a coach to have an answer. It does. It feels really, really good as a coach, a PT, an AT, as a human. So somebody comes to you with their problems and you can be the messiah. You can be the dude that has the answer in that moment. It's what we're built as humans to do. That you hear people talk about, like you hear it in a sauna with sauna bros all the time, dude. It's like they have no expertise in that field of question that they're talking about, but they have confidence and they want to have that answer. Like we have a need to help people, and it feels good for us to help people. That doesn't mean we're actually helping people. That's the confusion. That dopamine hit you get from pretending to help people does not actually mean you're helping them. And I think not getting lost in that. And again, I say this as a person that was for 4 or 5 years doing all these cues, saying all this stuff. So to prove my worth as a coach and like earn those good feelings, not to actually help the athlete. It's like, if I can show that I'm fixing your squat by not letting your knees go in or have you land better with some of these landing mechanic drills that I'm doing, I can visually show you that and I can make it look like I'm a good coach. It's really hard to show them like agility drills. It's like, here, this time you made that athlete miss and this time you didn't. And it's like, okay, well, where's my role in that as a coach, right? So I think admitting on the front end why. Like, why are we doing this? We're like, we say a lot of the stuff we say because it feels really good to have that answer. And the more, and you'll never break out of this completely because, again, it's how we're wired as humans. But the more you can stay out of that thought process of it's for me to feel good, or I'm saying that to feel good. And I'll catch myself a lot of times at the back end of it. It's like, but realizing, just be self aware and be like, oh, I said that to speed up this process so you felt like I was really smart or I had the answer. And I didn't even realize that in the front end. But now I'm looking back at that. I'm like, probably wasn't the best time to interject there or say that or do this drill, right? So I think the more we can admit that on the front end, the more it frees us up on the back end to actually help the athletes and not take it over as a coach. But I think as coaches and ATs and PTs, we get stuck in these stories ourselves. It's like, I am the knee guy that has the answers, and these are my answers that have worked, and I can't break out of my own system because it's what I've built my worth off of, is this system that I have created that gets results, and it's what people are expecting when they come to me. But is that working with the athlete in front of you? Yes or no? That's all that matters. And the more we can get there, and again, it's never going to be perfect. I'm not trying to speak like I'm a perfect coach in that setting. Like I get stuck in it all the time, but just more we can be self-aware of that. I think the less that happens and the more you can spend time in the present moment with that athlete to see what is working and what's not working.
You've touched on it a little bit, but over the past few years, what has shifted for you in the way that you view working with athletes and training athletes?
Yeah, dude, I was a movement optimist, like movement perfectionist when I started, 100%. Like, no knees in, you have to land a certain position, you have to decelerate in a certain position. Like, I was totally obsessed with these things. I was obsessed with straight lines. I was the coach that said, like, if we're running sprints, you have to touch the line here, you have to touch the line there. Your knees have to be in this placement. When we're sprinting, we're doing a lot of sprint technique work. You have to be like knees at 90. You're doing all these things. And again, my mentor, Stu Bourne, he just did a beautiful job of, I would say some dumb shit like that. And instead of like just telling me I'm a dumbass, because then my stubborn brain would be like, no, fuck you, I'm not. Like, I know the answers. Look at all this stuff. Look at all these studies that I'm saying done on like 12 untrained individuals, and I'm working with 35 elite athletes. Like, it doesn't apply. But he would just show me, I would say something like, let's just start with no knees in on the jumps. He would just be like, well, hey, look at this like Allen Iverson like photo. Like, what about that one? And he would just leave it on my desk. And when it push or anything, I'm like, ooh, like what's going on there? Like, why? And then one of the other things he was pointing out, he's like, I said something along the lines of, like, look at how much better they're getting at decelerating from our photos here and here. And he's like, yeah, but like, are they better on the field? Like, those guys still don't play. And I was like, oh shit, you got a good point there. Like, they're getting better at my drills, and the elite athletes are getting better at them, and the bad athletes are getting better at them. There's probably not a lot there to that drill other than just mastering the drill in and of itself. And I was just looking at, again, it's just all these paradoxes that Stu would just gradually point out to me. And then I just started to see them in my own program. I'm saying this makes a good athlete, but that athlete that can do that really well is a 7th string wide receiver. He's my best friend. He loves what I'm doing. I love what he's doing, but he doesn't play. Like, he's a drill killer on the field. So, like, what are we talking about there? If his goal is actually to start in football, like, maybe I need to like change what I'm talking about, because I have a lot of paradoxes here. I'm saying a lot of things that just don't make sense, and a lot of coaches do that. So I switched over to trying to stare at real life, but it took a long time, man. Like, COVID was a great time period for me because I was starting to get all these thought processes, and I was even starting to think and believe in them. Like, this movement variability, training in a way that helps the athlete on the field, not necessarily just in my drills. I was thinking of, but I was still stuck in my box. Like, when I had the beautiful weight room at St. Thomas and I had all these sport coaches telling me I was doing a great job and it looked pretty and it was amazing, then COVID hit and it was just anarchy. We were 3 months just like, dude, we had like a 3 or 6 month, I can't remember how long it was, but we had like 3 months off, and then we got to go back to college. And when we were at college, we had no weight room stuff. It was just turf stuff. So then I had like no option but to actually implement some of the things that I was talking about. Like, how can I do all of this without a barbell in my hands, which was like my comfort blanket. It was my binky. It was like, oh, I know exactly what to do with a barbell and how to make a session look great with that. Now I don't have that. And so I had to start implementing these things, and these athletes would be like, dude, I feel way fucking better. And I'm on the core. And they would send, the coolest thing is they would send me videos like, dude, this is exactly like that agility drill we were doing. And I felt so much more confident in that. And so I had less data than ever before that was telling me outright, this athlete got stronger, this athlete got bigger, this athlete got faster, this athlete got more agile, in quotations, because my stopwatch had less of that. but way, way more anecdotal evidence from these athletes that were coming to me and sending me stuff and being like, dude, look at this, like this is amazing. They would send me their practice film, like, this is exactly what we did. I felt like I had been in this position before because you had put us there in some of these agility drills, and I was like, man, I need to value that anecdotal evidence way more than I am currently, and go away from the KPIs over here way less. And then you run into the issue of, okay, you have way less of this data, way more of that data, but you can't really go to a coach and be like, yeah, he told me he's performing, like, he's told me he's doing a lot better job. They want numbers. They want analytics, and I get part of that. So, like, I had to find that happy middle ground of, we track analytics on this side just to say we had them. We do like fly 10 numbers, and we still do all of this just to show, like, all of that stuff still goes up because you're still doing a stimulus there. But now I really value the anecdotal evidence that these athletes are giving me, where they tell me they feel better, they tell me they feel more confident, or they've been in these positions before and they're less scared of certain movements or positions that they're stuck in, and starting to value that a little bit more.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to some of these things going on in the rehab world, where there's been huge pendulum swings of really not valuing any data or metrics from a return to sports standpoint. Besides this is the time from surgery, you're cleared because of time. And now there's so much value and effort pushed on data and metrics and percentages, but is that too sterile? And it's somewhere probably in the middle of, like, we have research to support that certain markers of force output comparing to the other limb, vertical jump, reactive strain, think decks, all these other, like, more objective things are probably, like, physiologically we need to get them to at least some level of capacity to have the strategies to get in and out of positions and have this movement variability, because if they don't, then maybe they are setting themselves up for only one pattern or a higher chance of this occurring again. And to the other side, it's like, if you don't develop those strategies and you don't show them that maybe when you do constrain this joint or this tissue, that there is still a huge deficit, they don't notice it because they are, like, freaky enough to get around it and they're super confident. But there may be times where, like, you need to pull them back and say, we do need to address this from a rehab or orthopedic standpoint, even though you're extremely confident. So I've seen it both ends on the rehab side, where 3 months out, status post ACL, an athlete's ready to go back, but it's because they've gotten out of this early acute post-op period. They say they feel good, but they haven't actually stressed the system to show their vulnerabilities at this point. So it is like matching the objective outputs that they should probably be hitting with their confidence. And if either of those are majorly off, then there's probably an issue.
Dude, yes. Like, that's so money. And that's why I think it's so important to start with your overarching goal of, your job is to take the athlete from where they are to where they want to go on the field or in life. If you're not working with an athlete, it's in life. But let's say on the field with this athlete, they want to be a starter. They want to have this return to play. That's what you need to stick with. And coaches get lost. They get lost in, I need the metric. It's Goodhart's law. If you start with the metric, you will do anything to get to that metric. Let's take the PT stuff out of it and just go, like, let's say, like vertical jump testing, right? That's a beautiful one with the jump mat. It's like, okay, Goodhart's law is telling me, and you do see it a lot with stopwatches too, where it's like they'll just click it fast. Like, they'll do anything to show that they made the progress. We get lost in our own data. It's no longer objective data because humans are like, we're not doing double blind studies. You as a coach, you want results. So you're gonna do anything if you start with the wrong goal in mind, which is, let's get this imbalance up, right? So, like, and I've seen stuff where it's like, the imbalance is up, but their strength is still way down, right? Like, this weird kind of thing. We get stuck, and so it's still a weaker athlete, but now they're past. They're good to go play again because we got it's like, yeah, but they're a weaker athlete now. They're more at risk. Like, what are we talking? We get lost in our metrics, and we do, again, it's not objective data anymore. And that's the funny thing with, like, sports scientists. It's like, we talk, it's sports science, but it's really, like, none of this science would ever actually hold up in the court of law of science, where it's like not a double blind study. So it's like, we know there's biases. Like, the book Science Fictions is a really, really good book about like how science is actually done and how easily it is to fuck up. consciously and subconsciously. Like you could just have a coach that just has a massive ego, and a lot of strength coaches do because they're ex-athletes, like whatever. Like so you can consciously do it to like I want to be the speed guy, and I've been at internships, dude, where it's like yeah, the first time they run this, like, don't tell them anything. Don't warm them up. Just have them run it and start the timer, stop the timer. To where at the post test, we're like, yeah, like, if you can, just click it a little bit earlier. And they justify it like, yeah, we want to show the athletes that they are faster and just give them that. It's all for the confidence boost. It's like, yeah, but your data doesn't, like, it's not real anymore. You know, like you're clicking the stopwatch faster, you're warming them up. It's not the same thing. So we get lost in our own data and we're no longer objective. But now it's like, we're no longer objective. We are currently lying. We're lost in our own data, but we can back it up with we are a scientist, right? So it's like it's almost this weird virtue signal trap you get stuck in of you are the smart coach, the smart coach that's lying without realizing it or not. So I think it's really important to start with that overarching goal and keeping that overarching goal as much as possible. Dude, I pulled myself so far out of the data. And as soon as we go to the jump mats and laser, I get fucking lost in the data as soon as it happens because it's so addicting, dude. It's such a game. And humans, it's like, ooh, he ran a 110 and now he's running a 109. Now he's running 107. It's like, oh man, we get so obsessed with that stuff. And it's so gamifiable for us. It's like, hey, literally have to tell myself, like, pull yourself back out. What's the goal? Just because they're faster and I'm spending 4 days a week sprinting, they need to become a more like adaptable athlete. Sprinting in a straight line more is not going to do that for that athlete. Some athletes it will, sure, but for that athlete it's not going to. But I'm getting my dopamine hit by showing that they're faster, and we get stuck in our own systems again, and we get lost in that. So I think the more we can just keep that and then use all the data again, that's not throwing out the data, it's not throwing out the Nordboard like challenges, not throwing out the Vertex, because like you said, you can absolutely get lost in becoming the movement yogi guy. But again, there is pieces of the day that will tell you stuff super clearly. Like this athlete's just not fast enough. This athlete just can't produce enough force. This athlete has a major imbalance. Use those data points, but again, apply those data points back into real life. Don't get stuck into those data points.
Yeah, I've noticed even with myself, with like we have dynamometry in our clinic. We have a isokinetic machine where it's this $50,000 piece of equipment, and this is the most gold standard thing that we can use to assess kind of the force output of a limb or of tissues. And this not arbitrary, but this black and white goal of we want 90% limb symmetry or above, or we want this amount per body weight. And it's like if we get 88%, we're pissed because somehow that change in 2% is going to magically reduce the risk of injury or increase the risk. And the more I dove into some of the research on like what are some of the modifiable and non-modifiable factors of secondary injury, so much of it is like prior history of injury is the highest risk factor for subsequent injury. And all these other things are pretty messy. And this like cutoff of they need 90% LSI or they need this amount on a reactive strength index. It's like those are valuable and we don't want these major gaps. We don't want them at 70% limb symmetry. But are we just as therapists or coaches like trying to shoot for that like really pretty, now they're at 95% and I've set them up substantially better than if they were at 91 or 88. And I have that internal conflict myself where I'm trying to set them up for the best chance of performance and the lowest chance of re-tear or re-injury. But so much of this is so messy. There's so many variables, and we're just trying to fit it into our box of like, if I accomplish this, then they'll be safe. And that's really hard to say.
Yeah, dude, it's super, again, it's super stressful because you're working with an athlete that they have put a ton of work into like wanting to come back and you want to help them on that journey. But again, what I've seen is like a lot of ATs, PTs, strength coaches included will spend 100% of their time to get that 88% to 90%, where it's like, okay, now they have the strength level at 88% and they haven't been put in an open environment. So now their ability to perceive and react to what's going around them is highly, highly compromised, right? So now they're getting stuck in super, and you see it with athletes, the concussion one's kind of a cool like study. It's like these athletes that aren't perceiving as well, now they're getting hit from spots they would never get hit from before because they're not perceiving the environment that they were perceiving before. So that linebacker that they used to see or used to process or used to have an option to get out of, either not seeing it, or they're not seeing it as well, or they're not picking the right movement options off of that because it's they either had a break, or their brain's not processing as fast, whatever the issue is there. But now they're getting stuck in a lot of awkward positions on the field, or they're getting hit in ways that they previously wouldn't have been hit before. So is it the 2%? Is it worth spending that time getting the 2%? Or if we're watching them, and again, this is why a holistic program in quotations is so important. Holistic is such a bad word right now, but is brutalized. But it's why like using all of these things is so important, because you'd see the 88%. Okay, the strength level's close. We should still work. Like, we can still work. It's not you throw that out. We just don't need to put all of our eggs into that basket, because I'm watching him when I put him in a more open environment. He's just not perceiving that information very well. 1v1, he's great, but I put him in a 2v2 and he's not, he either doesn't trust himself or there's something there. And I'm going to use that data point, right? So I think this using all of your data points and realizing like movement is data. Like, what we're watching out there is data. It is science. I'm watching it objectively in front of me. You can record it if you want to, and seeing he's not picking up on this stuff as well as he was before. And just like you have the 88% to 90, he's at 70% of his perception reaction ability. Obviously, that's like making up numbers there, but he's like at 70% there. Let's bring that up to 88% and spend a little bit more time there. And again, you don't throw out any of the strength work that you're doing to get there. It's not one or the other. It's like, I notice also a big red flag here. Let's spend a little bit more time here while still doing strength stuff. So as we're going from 70 to 88 here, we're also going from 88 to 89, and it might just take a little bit more time, but I'm not only doing on the 90. And this, again, you see it a lot in the college sector too, because it's pretty factory in the college sector. There's so many athletes, there's not enough coaches, not enough ATs. So it's like they get the 88, they get the 90, they get their clearing numbers. They hit, I mean, the worst is the time frames, like you were mentioning. Like, yep, his 3 weeks are up, send him back. Like, what? You're sending him back to full exercise? Dude hasn't done a change of direction drill in months. Like, what are we talking about? But he got his 90%. It's like, man, that athlete is not set up for success. So I think looking at those data pieces and working on everything once, rather than that factory style of certain arbitrary KPIs. Again, you don't throw out all the data, but you use all of your data. It's not one is better than the other. I think it's really important to look at where that athlete is struggling.
Does this change when it's a sport that's less reactionary in nature, with track and field sports, with certain things that are essentially pre-programmed and there's not as much chaos, like 100-meter sprinters? Does your view on some of these things that you've talked about up until this point change? I know that, for example, like Altus, a lot of these coaches and groups, like it comes across as extremely highly technical, and these like really, really, really small adjustments for these athletes for these sports where like there is maybe less total variables with the end goal of accomplishing the task. Does that change at all from you when it's a sport that isn't as chaotic?
No. No. The less chaotic it is, the more domed up those athletes are. The best athletes that I work with are those athletes. It's track athletes and pitchers. Those are the two number one athletes, the best athletes that come to me. Every time those two athletes work with us, they're like, dude, your program's magic. Everything's amazing. I'm so much better. Like, I've had track athletes specifically, PR ridiculous numbers and say, dude, I think it's because of the ISOs we did. It's like, physiologically, that PR is not possible, dude. Like, there was no physical change that we did that got you from that number to that number that quickly. Like, science-wise, that is not how that works, dude. Like, your body did not change that quickly. It was the mental piece of, I'm an athlete again. I need to get out of my own head and just do what I do, right? And Stuart McMillan, the guy at Altus, yeah, like he presents at Emergence all the time and talks about the constraint and how to create like an alive movement session in a world of technical components. But pitchers and track athletes, as soon as I get one of them, they have more resistance on the front end just because of all the stories they've been told. But the more you get them out of those stories, that's where they are shit at. They are shit at in their own heads. They're very constrained. They're very siloed. You get them out of that. They have more movement options. They still have their motor, and now they're able to line up and be like, dude, I have ran sprints in so many different ways. It does not matter if this track is wet. It does not matter if it's raining. It does not matter if I get a slow start. Like, I know I've been put in all these positions. It doesn't matter if my first step's bad. Like, I know how to compensate for these things. I put myself in enough movement problems to overcompensate for these things so I can be way more relaxed, right? And the more technical and the more less variety the sport is, the more relaxation matters, right? Like the more just like breathing and letting your body do what it does matters. Same with pitching, dude. It's like the more domed up you get, the more degrees of freedom that you freeze. If you ever see an athlete run, like a lot of these technical coaches like talk about, unless they are just an amazing athlete that's way over that can overcompensate for that, they look like robots running, and robots don't run fast, man. Like these athletes are not running fast because they have these super like positions. The more you free those athletes up and let them do what they do, the better it is. And I think athletes like that just have very little exposure to freedom of movement, and the more you can give them just a touch of that, the more they're just like, man, this is nice. I'm an athlete again. And like, hell yeah, you are.
Is there a sport that you've noticed has been the most challenging to work with, or a subset of athlete within that sport?
Again, on the front end, like pitchers and baseball athletes for sure, and track athletes. But again, that's on the front end. But it's just, they have so many things that have been told to them for so long, and now you get them like even 13-year-old athletes. Like I work with a 13U baseball team, and already you can see like they have to do their arm care, they have to throw in certain slots. I listen to their coaches talk to them, and it's very, very technical, very, very specific. They need to put their glove there, they need to do that. Like they're so domed up by 13 years old. It's like, and that's 13-year-olds. Imagine you get a 22-year-old who has 9 more years of that experience, 9 more years of that coaching, and it's just the culture of the sport, right? And I think the more you can get those athletes out of their culture, their sport, and back into movement. So it's like lacrosse is the best one to work with, because lacrosse culture of the sport is freedom of movement. And those athletes are, oh, dude, they're beautiful. It's just they get lesser athletes typically because lacrosse is not rewarded in the same way as a culture in general, right? So it's like they're beautiful moving athletes. I've seen a lot less, okay, this is going to sound weird, but lesser athletes in lacrosse, like where they just have less movement, like motor. Like they don't sprint super fast. They're not jumping super high. That's probably why they went to lacrosse, because it's like they wouldn't make it on a football field. Like American football is a highly rewarded sport in our culture. So they're going to get all the high motor guys. The same thing with the Olympic sports. Like American football is paid more than the Olympic sports. So most really explosive big guys are going to go play offensive line rather than throw the shot put, right? And then you get like the Ryan Krausers, who could have played NFL line. Then he goes to that sport and he fucking dominates and breaks all the world records, right? So it's like they get the leftover athletes, but these athletes that have less motor have way more movement options, and they kick the shit out of a lot of these athletes that like have massive motors, but they're stuck in the culture of their sport where it's a very constrained. They have less movement freedom. So I think the more you can get high motor athletes into an environment like a lacrosse culture or a JST culture, where they're able to express with their like insane movement motor, the better. That was a random tangent that I just had clicked there, so I was piecing that together as I was talking. But like I see it all the time. Like lacrosse and hockey are two beautiful sports to work with because of how the nature of their sport is. And if you could just get a high motor athlete that was grown in that culture, and then you put them into American football, like the results are amazing. A lot of our best linebackers that we worked with at the Division I level had a big lacrosse background, and that it's an amazing connection. And they always talk about it. It's like, yeah, dude, lacrosse helped me so much because I'm just able to see things on the field, and I just react and I go do it. I'm like, that's what the best linebackers do. But then you bring them to an American football practice, dude, and I don't know your experience with American football, but like it's 6-inch steps we teach as linebackers. Like it's like a 6-inch step and then a 2-step drop. Like it's like, what are we doing, dude? Like that athlete's never gonna actually do that on the field. Like, what are we talking about? You're constraining that athlete to look pretty, but then you watch the sport and it's nothing like that. The good athletes are never doing that. If an athlete's ever thinking about taking that first 6-inch step, he's definitely going to be on the bench, right? So, and that's the tough thing, is like those bench players are the ones that feel like they need to perfect these random drills of the 6-inch step, but they're not good enough, dude. And like they need to be in a more free play. They need to trust their instincts a little bit more, and you need to put them in environments where they trust those instincts a little bit more.
Yeah, I've noticed that in the clinic with these really young kids that are either highly specializing in cheer or dance or baseball or soccer. And it's like, okay, they're coming in with these like persistent aches and pains, or their elbow hurts, or they have bilateral knee pain. And it's like, they're also super stressed out. They're like just intense kids because they spend 5 hours a day doing this one thing, and they've lost their childhood and their ability to like explore other things and enjoy their sport. Now it's just like a job for them, and that's just super sad.
So sad, dude. Like I talk about making training fun again. Like, dude, we got to go back to that age of things. And you talk about like the overuse injuries. It's like they're doing the same sport, and then they come to your sports or your sports performance center or AT center, and instead of giving them movement options there, it's like we're creating overuse injuries in our own like gym. It's like you have to squat the same way every single time, right? So you're stressing the same joints, same ligaments, same muscles every single time in the same exact way. You have to jump and land in the same exact way every single time. It's like that's the definition of like trying to create an overuse injury. Like let that body self-organize so every time it's slightly different. Rob Gray he talks about that in his book. And I think he says it's his theory. I don't think he has any science backing it up. I love that theory. It's like if you can practice that athlete landing different every time, you're going to have less overuse injuries, actually less injuries than the injury prevention model that is overstressing the same tendons, ligaments, and muscles in the same exact way over and over again, rather than having these athletes be very adaptable. And every single time they land, every single time they squat, it's just slightly different, and it works a slightly different muscle in a different way, or slightly loads the tendon or ligament in a slightly different way. And the more you try to like drill yourself to be a robot, I think the more wear and tear you get on specific muscles or specific tendons and specific ligaments on specific spots, then you get that flare up, right? The biggest flare up I get is when I'm swinging softball off a tee. To tee, like, and I love doing softball on tee because I'm fucking obsessed with it and I love it, but I know it's what causes a lot of my elbow pain. It's because I'm trying to hit the ball exactly the same way every single time. I don't get the same pain when I'm continually practicing with a pitcher, because like the pitch is just slightly different every time, to where I'm still trying to have like a similar swing, but maybe it's up here, here, and that slight variation, the body self-organizes and not run my head through a wall. I'm just so obsessed with the sport itself that like I don't have a pitcher that'll pitch to me as much as I want. Like I'll be out there for 4 hours a day. I can't hire a pitcher to go do that every single day with me. Other people have lives, I don't. I get that, but I realized like that was a really good example for me of, oh, this is exactly like working landing mechanics. Is this swing? I'm swinging in the same exact spot over and over and over again, rather than that. And again, it's a tiny variation. It's like I still want to have a similar swing. Like if your swing's drastically changing, you're going to get out a lot. I'm still trying to have a same swing, but that ball just takes you in slightly different variations every single time. And my elbow has way less pain when I have that slight variety.
Austin, do you have any final thoughts for rehab providers, younger coaches, any general thoughts before we wrap it up?
I think that the biggest message that I got for most PTs, ATs, coaches is neurotic athlete or not neurotic coaches create neurotic athletes, right? And it's a trained brain disease, brain virus that we got as coaches from other coaches and other systems, and then we infect athletes with it. And it's one of the most dangerous things we do as PTs, ATs, coaches, right? Telling an athlete they can't do a movement, telling an athlete they're incapable, telling an athlete they are broken. You don't understand the power of your words. You don't understand how many times I've had an athlete come to me and say, yeah, I was told I can't squat. I was like, when were you told that? Well, when I was 12. It's like, oh man, dude, like that, you don't understand the power of your words, and you have to pay attention to those things. Athletes hold on to the stories you tell them. You are the professional. They should be able to trust you, and they want to be able to trust you. And when you tell them a story, they take those stories in, man, and they download them. They are not experts in PT. They are not experts in strength conditioning. They're not experts in the body, right? So when an expert does tell them, a doctor does tell them something, like it matters to them, and they tell that story over and over and over again, and just paying attention to that, like realizing when you say those things, they are downloading that. And many times when they download that, they keep that story downloaded for a long period of time. And many athletes don't escape these stories, right? So neurotic coaches create not neurotic athletes. Don't be one of the neurotic coaches. Break yourself out of that mold, first off, and then break your athletes out of that mold. And I think it's unbelievably powerful when you get an athlete, and rewarding as a coach, when you get an athlete that starts to trust their own bodies again, and they break out of these stories that they've told themselves. And again, you do it in a very regressed way. You can do it in a scientific way. You don't have to do it in a, yeah, you're just capable, dude. No athlete gives a fuck with you just telling them those words. Like they've already told themselves they're not. You got to prove it to them. I think gymnastics is a beautiful way to do that, like slow-mo rolls. Athletes that don't believe they can bend their spine at all, you put them in some of these slow-mo rolls where they're folding and rolling over, just a simple somersault, man. You take a video of that, you show them their spine segmenting, and then you can they're like, oh, that's kind of cool, and maybe you can get them to do a really light Jefferson from that moment forward, and you get them back into that spinal flexion. And just, again, proving to them that they're not broken, they're not hurt, and they don't need to be neurotic. And I think that starts with us as coaches, and I think it's an extreme responsibility we have as coaches, doctors, PTs, ATs, chiros, whatever it is, that we don't talk about enough. Like, we don't talk about the responsibility our word or an power our words have. And I think we can change that very easily by just having more faith in the human body. And again, you don't have to throw everything out. You don't have to be unscientific. You don't have to be the movement yogi. You don't have to be the meathead. You don't have to hurt athletes to do this. You can do it in a very scientific, step-by-step way, even analytical way. I don't have an analytical brain, but I know a lot of coaches that do have a very analytical brain that are still doing it this way, and they're still proving to their athletes that they are capable. And I think that's the number one thing we can do as coaches.
I love that. I think that's a perfect place to stop. Thank you so much, Austin. This was great.
Thank you for having me on. This was awesome.